Have you ever noticed like how much we obsess over our kids' environment? Like if we just, I don't know, curate the perfect nursery, they'll turn out amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like color-coded toy bins, or we trying to engineer brilliance or something. But what if we're like totally missing the point? What if it's not about a picture-perfect playroom, but something much more, natural?
Well, this is something Charlotte Mason was writing about way back in the early 1900s, and it's still so relevant. This idea of education as an atmosphere. We're going to take a deep dive into her book series, specifically Volume 6, to explore this idea.
Okay, so education as an atmosphere. Break that down for me.
So Mason, she argued that education, it's not just about structured lessons, right? It's about the whole environment, the atmosphere a child is immersed in. That's what really shapes their development.
So are you saying it's not just about like flashcards and times tables?
Exactly. She believed that kids are hardwired to learn from everything around them.
I love that. It's like we think we need to like cram all this knowledge into their heads. But they're like sponges, soaking up everything around them all the time.
Exactly. And when we create an environment that's, too curated, too controlled, we're actually limiting their learning. Mason argued that instead of this like meticulously crafted environment, children need an atmosphere which nobody has been at pains to constitute.
So are you saying we should ditch the perfectly organized Montessori shelves and just like let them loose in the backyard?
Well, it's not quite that simple.
Okay.
But you're getting the idea. It's about recognizing the power of real life experiences, right? The relationships, even like the scrapes and bruises that come from just natural consequences. Mason describes this beautifully. Think like, romps with his father, is teased by his brothers, learns self-denial by the baby's needs, learns intimacy with animals from his dog and cat.
Okay, that sounds like a Norman Rockwell painting. I think some listeners might be thinking, that's sweet, but my kid's obsessed with their iPad, not kittens and, picking berries.
And that's a fair point. It's not about recreating some idealized past, right? It's about understanding the principle behind it. Just like, a plant needs the right balance of sunlight and nutrients to thrive, kids need a mix of freedom, real-world interaction, and, even a little bit of chaos to really learn and grow.
So what would you say to a parent who's listening and thinking, okay, less Pinterest, more playtime?
Yeah.
Got it. But like, how do I actually make this atmosphere thing work in real life?
I think it starts with small changes. So instead of, handing your child a tablet while you're grocery shopping, involve them in picking out produce.
Yeah.
Comparing prices. Maybe let them handle a small purchase. I mean, that's real life math and social skills in action.
It's about finding those teachable moments, those organic moments in everyday life.
Yeah. And don't underestimate the power of just letting them be kids. Let them build a fort in the living room. Get messy with mud in the backyard. Let them invent a game with like sticks and rocks. These little moments, they're actually huge for learning and problem solving.
Yeah.
And for creativity.
So we might not all have like sprawling blackberry hedges and kittens running around, but
right.
We can create that same sense of exploration, that same kind of discovery in our own way.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to how this concept of atmosphere translates to a school setting.
Yeah.
Which, as we know, can sometimes feel, at odds with this idea of natural child-led learning.
Yeah, because let's be honest, classrooms today are nothing like leisurely nature walks.
Right.
And, having deep philosophical discussions with the village elder.
And, Mason was actually pretty critical of the overly stimulating environments that she saw in schools even back then. She described children with young faces, not serene and joyous, but eager, restless, apt to look anxious and worried. And sadly, that still rings true today.
Over 100 years later, it's like she could be describing a modern classroom with all the pressure and demands and everything.
Exactly. The pressure to achieve, the constant testing, the focus on grades over, really understanding. It all just creates an atmosphere that really, it can stifle a child's natural love of learning.
And it's a huge problem in education today. It's like we're so busy stuffing information into their heads, but forgetting about that love of learning, that just natural drive that Mason was talking about.
So how do we tap into that? Like, how do we cultivate that love of learning, especially when the whole system, it often feels like it's working against us?
That's the big question. I think for Mason, it really starts with a shift in our perspective.
Yeah.
She saw that the best learning environment, they were the ones where teachers and students, they were all kind of on this common pursuit of knowledge. It wasn't just a teacher, like, dictating information.
Right.
It was about this shared curiosity.
Yeah, like when you're in a class and even the teacher gets sidetracked because something's just so fascinating.
Exactly.
Remember in high school, our history teacher, he spent a whole week on like the food of ancient Rome because we just got so into it. It's about creating those sparks, those moments of real engagement, and you can do that even within a curriculum.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a huge thing.
Right.
It could be as simple as just encouraging students to ask more questions or look at different perspectives, even challenge what the textbook is saying.
Yeah, instead of just memorizing dates and names,
Right.
It's helping them understand the why, the story behind it all, right?
Yeah.
So history becomes this living thing, not just a bunch of facts you got to cram for a test.
Exactly. And it applies to all subjects, not just history. When we help kids connect with the material, like on a personal level, to their lives, their interests, learning, it becomes more about meaning, less about just memorizing.
All of those aha moments, the ones that really stick with you.
Exactly. And those are way more likely to happen when curiosity is encouraged and mistakes, they're just part of the process.
Which is tough, right? Because we're still in the system of standardized tests and grades.
Mm-hmm.
So as parents, educators, how do we help kids navigate that pressure while still protecting that love of learning?
Well, it's a balancing act for sure, but I think it comes down to communication,
Yeah.
Help kids understand that grades, they're just one way of measuring progress.
Right.
They don't define them.
Exactly.
Encourage them to really follow their passions outside of school.
Yeah.
Find topics they're excited about. And most importantly, we have to model that ourselves.
Oh, that's so huge.
Right.
Because if we're stressed about deadlines and performance, how can we expect them to see it differently?
Exactly. They pick up on everything, our anxieties, our priorities, our own attitudes towards learning. So if we want them to be lifelong learners, we have to show them what that looks like.
We have to show them that being curious and asking questions, it's not just for kids.
Yeah, it's something that enriches our lives no matter how old we are.
Totally.
And I think sometimes we just have to let go of a little control. We don't need all the answers, We don't have to micromanage their whole journey. Trust their curiosity, be supportive, and be ready to be surprised.
I love that. Sometimes the best thing we can do is step back and just let them explore.
It's about embracing the messiness of learning, not trying to make them into these perfect little academics.
Right.
It's about discovery, and that's lifelong, right?
So we've talked about like ditching the perfect Pinterest nursery and all that and embracing this more organic approach to learning. But how do we actually do that? Like, how do we create that atmosphere in the real world? It feels like it'd be so easy to like slip back into old habits.
It's tough for sure. And honestly, there's no one right answer. Every kid is different. Every family is different. And the great thing about this approach, it really allows for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So where do we even begin?
Well, I think it starts with just paying attention, observing your child, noticing what they're curious about, what gets them excited, what are they drawn to, what questions are they asking, because we get so caught up in like our own ideas of what they should be learning that we forget to just watch them, see what they're naturally interested in.
Yeah, we stop seeing the world through their eyes.
Exactly. And you'll be surprised once you start looking for those opportunities, those organic learning moments. They're everywhere.
Right.
A trip to the grocery store, that's math, that's economics. A walk in the park, that's science. It's all around us.
It's about being present, being engaged, and noticing those moments.
Exactly. And you know what else? Don't be afraid to let them be bored sometimes.
Wait, really? Isn't that like the opposite of what we're supposed to do?
Just hear me out for a second. Boredom, it can be a good thing. When kids aren't constantly bombarded with stuff, their imaginations, they can finally run wild.
So instead of like handing them a screen every time there's a quiet moment.
Right. Give them some art supplies, some blocks, even just cardboard boxes, and then step back and see what happens. You might be amazed at what they come up with.
It's so true. I used to spend hours building forts out of blankets and pillows.
Exactly. And those experiences, they stay with us. That's where creativity comes from, problem solving, resilience.
It's about letting them experiment, letting them try things out.
And making mistakes. We're so obsessed with perfection these days, but kids need to know it's okay to mess up.
Yeah, those failures, those are often the best learning experiences.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Charlotte Mason and education as an atmosphere, I hope everyone listening feels like, like they can try this out. You don't need fancy stuff or expensive programs, just a new way of looking at things.
And a little trust in those amazing little humans we get to learn alongside.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about making learning a joy, not a chore. That's what sticks with them.
Beautifully said.